Ready. All right. Good morning, everyone. Today's SHIUR, we are in the week of Bo, Parshas Bo. And we always do what we call Parsha Rewind, where we think about last week's Parsha as it carries forward into this week, and the events that are surrounding us. And yesterday I got a phone call. No, I learned on the phone with a very bright, brilliant, successful person in the States, I'm very close with. And he told me that he went to the football game yesterday. And he asked me an interesting question. He said that the hero of the game was somebody who had been formerly rejected by the same team and came back. And he asked me, is this some sort of divine justice? In other words, does Hashem care who wins the football game? That's the basic question. So we entered into a discussion of Hashgacha Pratis, and I thought I said it's the topic of this week's Parsha, so let's go right there. So we use that as a springboard. The beginning of the Parsha is a very widely discussed pasuk by all the Mefarshim, Rashi, Ramban, everyone. It's probably one of the most difficult passages because it seems, on its surface, Rambam discusses it in Hilchos Tshuva, that it seems to be essentially a contradiction. In other words, what was the first pasuk in Parshas Bo? So, Vayomer Adonai el Moshe, Bo el Paro, V'dibarte elav, Ko amar Adonai Elohei ha'ivrim shalach es ami ve'avduni. So, what does it mean, Bo? Come with me to Paro. So my little Akiva says that's because the gematria of Bo is 3, because there are 3 makos left in this week's Parsha. But there's a lot more to his comment than seems on the surface. I asked him to go deeper, and he said, but that's what it means. There's 3, what's the significance of it? But it's 3. But it does go deeper. The delineation of the Parshios also has to do with a different methodology of Hashgacha Pratis that came into force between last week's Parsha, this week's Parsha, between the first 7 makos and the final 3 makos. First of all, what is it that Moshe was exactly told to do? Right? Oh, so that's the end of Parshas Va'era. And then it picks up again here. Bo el paro, ki ani hichbadeti et libo. I made his heart heavy. Ve'es lev avadav, not only his, but those of all his servants. Leman shisi ososai eile bikirbo, so that I can make all my wonders happen in his midst. Okay, so first of all, says Rashi, what was the purpose of this? Bo el paro v'hisrebo. Rashi says to give him a warning. Which warning? For the 7th makkah, right? Which is Arba. Now, giving a warning implies that Paro had a choice to listen or not to listen. So then what does the rest of the pasuk mean? Ki ani hechbadzi et libo. I made his heart heavy. So what is Rashi telling us? It seems to be a contradiction in terms. Did Paro have a choice? Did he have bechira? Or was the hashgacha of Hashem such that he did not have bechira? And according to Rashi, both are true. How can you understand that? That's our problem. How do you explain that? So the Rambam actually says in Hilchos Tshuva that, and the Ramban here on the Parsha is a very celebrated Ramban. It's one Ramban that everybody should focus on. He asked the question. He says, how could Hashem even punish Paro if he didn't do anything wrong? If a person is not culpable, they didn't make the choice, it's not their fault. How could the just God punish somebody who he himself hardened his heart to do the Aveira? It's a philosophical question of major, it's one thing, it's like tzaddik viralo, kind of. What did Paro do wrong? He didn't do anything to deserve this treatment. So what's going on here? So the Ramban offers basically Ramban I'm sorry. We're going to do the Rambam and the Ramban on this. Okay, the Ramban basically says, well, Paro had his chances. The first 5 Makos, he didn't listen. That was his personal choice. And therefore, since he didn't listen, Hashem then, for the final set of Makos, decided to harden his heart in order that the Darkei Tshuva were stopped in front of them, and therefore Hashem utilized him for his own purposes. The Rambam in Hilchos Tshuva says a very similar thing. He says there's some people who their evil is so great, right, that what Hashem wants to happen here is that they die, or they expire, they leave the world due to their sins. In other words, there is an aspect of divine justice. And since there's no way for this to make the case that this person should be, under normal circumstances, allowed out of this punishment, the punishment arrives. And in this case, Paro's punishment was that his free will be taken away, and that all these makos be utilized as a way of showing Hashem's name in the world. So the difficulty with that is that, again, where is Bechira? Where is free will? Because even if you'll tell me a person was very, very evil, right? But does that mean that they shouldn't have a chance to come back? We thought Darchei Tshuva are never closed. So the Nesiv Shalom writes here, and this opens us up to the question of the levels of Hashgacha Pratis that exist. They're very complex, and there are, I would call, a spectrum of Hashgacha. There's like a spectrum, it goes from less loud to more loud, less bright to more bright. Hashgacha Pratis is not a fixed thing, but is fluid along a line, a continuum, I'll call it, a continuum of Hashgacha Pratis. So let's understand. The Ramban says, yes, it is true. The Nesiv Shalom says what the Ramban says and the Rambam says is true if we understand that at that point in the spectrum, there's no turning back, right? There's really no turning back. However, there is a way, there is always a way out. The way out is if that person would truly turn their heart and mind to Hashem. It's possible, it's not likely, it's a long shot. It's, pardon the expression, a Hail Mary into the end zone when you're down in the football game by many points. And I think that's actually what did happen in the football game. The very, very last play of the game, the very last play, they was like 2 yards away, and thank God they avoided a disaster. The other team didn't get into the end zone from this far away. Wow. So that's what are the chances of that? But do they exist? Yes, they always exist. So the analogy would be someone who's, like, say, extremely riddled by an addiction, let's say. Someone who's addicted to drugs in a terrible way, or whatever it is. So we know that no matter what they've done or how low they've sunk, right, and what they've done to get their drug of choice, or what suffering they've put their family or other people in the world through, family, spouses, etc., children, you can literally find a person out in the street, down and out, and that person can actually completely come back and turn around their life if they turn their life over to Hashem. But that has to be something that they do with sincerity and with, clarity. And the greatest example of that was King Menashe. King Menashe was from the Davidic dynasty, specialized in Shuvah, right? And we'll go also to King Chizkiyahu in a moment also. So King Menashe was unfortunately a king that the Mishnah Sanhedrin says did not deserve Olam Haba, and it's a question in the Mishnah whether he got it or not. Now the truth is that he did tshuva. The Torah says he was on the verge of being killed by his enemies, and after praying to every other god in the world, he said, well, what I got to lose? I'll try good old Hashem. And it worked. And the Gemara describes an amazing thing. It says that Hashem created a tunnel, not like the tunnels in Gaza, the exact opposite, a tunnel of mercy to allow the prayers of Menashe to reach the Kisei HaKavod, even though the Midat Hadin would not allow it. So let's understand what that means. Let's go into the idea of Hashgacha. What does that mean? That Hashem, what is he fighting with himself? He's got a system of justice, right? So then why did he allow him to beat the system of justice? What's going on? Again, Achbadati at Leiv Paro, but at the same time, Paro could have made his way like Menashe up to the Kisei HaKavod. So in Derech Hashem, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto explains it like this. And it's a very complicated subject. There's many nuances. I'm going to try and take a simple approach that I think is what the Ramchal is teaching, and I think it's consistent with the Ramban and the Rambam too. He says this is how Hashem has created his world. What goes on down here mirrors what goes on up there. In here, in this world, especially in the more well-developed countries, there's a court system, right? You have a penal code, and you have a justice, you have courts, you have a Supreme Court, even in Israel, right? Unfortunately. And there are laws. If you violate the law, you might not get punished. You're only going to get punished if it comes to the attention of the prosecutor. So who's the prosecutor? The Satan is the prosecutor. His job, he's the district attorney of the Ribono Shel Olam, right? He's the, what do you call it, the praklita, it's called the praklitut, I think it's called, right? Attorney general, not attorney general, there's a word for that, the prosecuting attorneys. So the way Ramchal describes it, Hashem sits above the entire system. Hashem can do anything that he pleases, and the entire court system is nothing to Hashem. He can override it at any moment and any time. However, in his great wisdom, to create a world of choice and to create a world of earned reward, right? He said, let me set up a system where people are judged by their merits. And this only applies to human beings. Says the Ramchal, this does not apply to animals. Okay, animals are innocent if they do what their thing is, what's normally done. The rules, they are supervised by angels who get their orders from upstairs, from the kochot, from the sfirot that Hashem used. It's a management system. Hashem is lahavdil, so to speak, the CEO of everything. Then you got the top level management. Those are called the kochos or the sfiros. And then below them is a series of angels, maybe many hundreds, that then delegate all the way down to things that are happening in this world. What's the medium that things cross over between the spiritual world of the Malachim and the physical world? You know what the medium is? How do those worlds connect? Through how do they connect? Through the stars, through the Kochavim and the Mazalos. That's what we speak about, Mazel. A person has Mazel. Even a Jew has Mazel to a certain extent. But animals are completely under their mazel, right? If you're born a weak grizzly bear, as opposed to a very strong grizzly bear, you're not going to be the king of the herd, right? If you are gifted with, being 6'7", you're probably going to get a chance to play basketball. And if you're 5'2", you're not, most likely. That's just your mazel. Hashem decided this is you. You're a brick in the building of my universe. And this is where you are in the building. Some people are in the basement, Nebuch. Some people are in the penthouse. Some people are somewhere in between. Some people are on the stairway. You do your thing. Hashem created you as part of the bigger parcel of the world. And there are angels that run that. That's up into the world of animals. Once we get to human beings, Hashem has the justice system. That's what's called the Hanhaga HaMishpat. There is a Hanhaga that works based on rule of law. You do a mitzvah, you do something good, you're rewarded. You do something bad, you're punished. Hashem likes you. He might put you through trials and tribulations in order to grow you, right? My wife recently showed me a book by a gentleman who was a very, very successful salesman. Really, very successful. And he was going to get married and everything good, and he had a horrific car accident, in which literally his bones were exposed through his, body. Ad kedei kach. crushed. And you know what? His attitude was, Gamzula Tova. Gamzula Tova. He rebuilt himself physically, learned to walk again, and he came back, and he went back to his old job, and he reached the sales records even more. And then he said, this is not enough. There's more that I can do out there. And he became a really successful, inspiring trainer. His springboard, lo aleinu and lo on anybody that we possibly could know, was the fact that Hashem broke him to make him much, much better. Much, much better than he would ever have been. So there is a justice system. We may not understand it. We definitely don't understand it. But we have to believe with the Emunah Shlema that Hashem is not only a just king, but a king of mercy. And if he gives us Yisurim of whatever kind, it's for our good, for our ultimate good. By the way, there's no difference between a Jew or a non-Jew. So what about the Jewish people? So on this, the Ramchal says, and this is also Rav Wolbe speaks about in SHIUR, that we're like that favored son. You know, if a guy has a bunch of kids, right, some are a little dull-witted, some are okay, you know, so he'll reward them and love them and everything good. And then he's got this gifted child who's the hope of the whole family. How does he treat the gifted child different than the more average children? How do you what would you anticipate that parent to do to that child? That's the child that's going to send them. Oh, you can be a great dancer. I'm sending you to the Bolshoi. I'm giving you to this horrific Russian coach, and they're going to torture you day in and day out until you dance in the ballet. What is he punishing him? What, the other kids get to play ball and get to have a good time, and they go out to eat, and everything's fine, and they're good kids and they're great kids, and we love them. Yeah. But B'ni B'chor Yisrael, the Jewish people have a task because our success is the entire world's success. If we are successful, we will inspire and hold together the whole family of mankind. We'll hold a beacon for them to climb upwards towards us. That's exactly it. We're going to be up here, and we're going to give them a chance to ascend Yaakov's ladder, literally. And that's our job. And that's what must be. And that is Hashem's will. Whether you like it or not, sorry, you're the gifted child. Like it or not. And to such an extent that what happens if we mispractice every day, or we don't want to go, or we play hooky, right? Or we fail to do our lessons. We're not learning the violin the way we're supposed to be learning it. We're not working hard at it. We're not striving upwards towards Hashem and connecting with Hashem in a deeper and deeper and deeper way and unlocking our potential. Then Hashem will send us a reminder very, very quickly. Because we don't want to lose this kid. If you had a parent with a gifted child and they spent 1 week out of the Mizgeret, freaking out, you're after him. If you have another kid, who cares? Leave him alone. We'll pick it up after the summer, whatever it might be. So the second level hashgacha that the Ramchal speaks about is not hashgachat hamishpat, which is the general rule of reward and punishment that every human being has access to and must reach their potential that way. It's feedback. There's reward, there's punishment. But then for Klal Yisrael as a whole, our eternal nation is constantly being managed by Hashem with his own eyes. Much like Eretz Yisrael, which is the land of Klal Yisrael, is hyper-managed, so to speak, by Hashem personally. His eyes are on it all day. What does it mean eyes are on it? Ramchal says, because Hashem delegates to Malachim. The 70 nations have designated Malachim. One thing I found in Ramchal, which I found fascinating, is that not only are there 70 nations, but there are 7 super nations, meaning 7 each have 10 under them. Interesting, you know? How many seats are there in the Security Council? How many permanent members? Is there 5 permanent members in the UN Security Council? Right? I think it's 5. I think it's 5. But there's always a few others hanging around. Interesting to think about which nations and their angels, so to speak, are the 7, and because they represent the kind of like the tamtzit, the essence of all the 70 nations. The other 10 that's under their jurisdiction kind of follow their lead. Yeah. You want to take a guess who the 7 nations are today? I'm not sure it changes. Maybe not, but who are those 7 nations today? Take a guess. Who do you think?
United States.
United States for sure one.
Russia.
Russia is probably one.
China.
China's probably one.
North Canada.
I don't know. I don't know if India is separate. It may not be, but it's definitely there. I mean, it's huge, huge, huge country.
It doesn't matter how the size is.
Right. Influence. I think it's influence. Influence. And so who else is an influential nation? China's for sure influential. Russia's for sure influential. I don't know. I don't think they're. I mean, obviously, one of the I think it's the European nations which have now kind of Franco, Germany, England, whatever you want to put them together. The EU or EUites are probably one, and then you have to say some of the Muslim countries. There's Muslims are a billion. How many billions of Muslims? So you want to say Egypt, Saudi Arabia, one of those two. What's that? And then of course, Iran, which is why Iran has made a comeback. Because Iran is actually a very, very important nation because it was one of our 4 galuyot. And you don't get that job to be one of our 4 galuyot if you're not somehow a very significant on an essential level. Paras and Madai is a very essential component of the world. Yeah, so they had to come back. SHIUR, by the way, and Bavel are kind of one entity. So I would say that there is an entity called what's the like the Bavel, for lack of a better word, Bavel. But the Bavel of today, right, has been overrun as it was in ancient times by the Persians, who defeated Nebuchadnezzar's progeny, right? And Dariush took over from Belshazzar. So you kind of see that today, that, you know, as the Babylonians descended off the map, there's no more Saddam Hussein, and there's no more, I mean, Assad is a joke. And all those people, they don't really exist. Paras has sort of subsumed that role, you know. So those nations have a lot to say about what goes on in Shemaim, and Hashem says, according to Ramchal, believe it or not, the deliberation in these courts is very extensive, and it's not like human deliberations. Angels have a lot more truth, clarity, no personal agenda, and it's a very pure, you know, logical argument, and they're considering all the time anybody who the Satan opens up a file for. And we all know what gets your file opened the most? Lashon Hara. If you prosecute anybody with your words, Mida keneged Mida, you get prosecuted. It's just that simple. And the Ramchal says everything operates Mida keneged Mida. Because that's generally just, that's what's just. That's what's moral. You know, and Hashem leaves it up to you. We'll take our cues from you. This is what you did, great. So this system is very complicated and is very extensive, except when it comes to Klal Yisrael. Then it's on a completely different level called Hashgachas Ha-Yi'ud. Yi'ud or Yichud. Hashem has a special role for us, and we cannot fail. Because if we fail, what happens to the world? The world goes back to Tohu Vavohu, to nothingness, which is where it was for 2,000 years until Avraham Avinu came along. Right? And Hashem does not want that. There is a happy ending to the story of the world. There has to be a happy ending. And the happy ending is coming. So let's understand what that is. So what is this special, unique Hashgacha Pratis? That's what we enter to in Parshas Bo. And the way I'm going to explain this is something that is brought down in the Ari, it's brought down in the Zohar. It says, look, we all know that the upper forces of the world follow a pattern known as the Spheros, right? That's the operating system of Hashem Bigadol. 7 Makos appear in Parshas Va'era. Which 7 Sephiros do they represent? They represent the lower case, which is Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. Go out and do the math. We can look at every Makkah, for example, and see how it reflects that Midah. But according to the Zohar and according to other Sfarim, it works backwards. In other words, Dam was connected the lower sphere of Malchut. Why? Because what was the mainstay of Egypt? What is the main thing of Egypt altogether? The Nile. And Paro just identified himself with the Nile. In fact, every time Moshe starts a series of Makos, where does he go to Paro? Always by the Nile. Because what's the essential point? Paro goes to the bathroom every morning to make believe that he and the Nile are one, in terms of that he's not a human being, or he's somehow the great crocodile of the Nile, which is what the Navi calls him. He is a personification of the Nile. That's what he presented himself as.
He has no human needs.
Because he has no human needs. So he's like some sort of appendage of the Nile, or the human force that symbolizes the Nile. Aniha Yaor Ubarati. That's what the Navi says about him. Paro says, I am the Nile and I created it. And Moshe challenges him on that and says, no. Who's in charge here? Who is the Melech? Hashem. So Malchut is always associated with the Nile because that's the ultimate of sovereignty. Who is ultimately in control? And by the way, the essence of Malchut is life and death, right? Because what does a king get to decide? You cross the king, what does he do? Off with your head, right? Malchut means, and symbolically, in Kabbalah, it also means dam, because that's associated actually with the malkah, with not the king, but the queen, because essentially Malchut is a feminine aspect, because it is the collective power of everything. And collective means it receives power from the other spheros. So it's the bringing it all together, creating of community, for lack of a better word. So, dam. Go to Tzvardeya. What is Tzvardeya? Is the sphera of Yesod. Okay? What does Tzvardeya have to do with Yesod? Very simple. First of all, look at the word. Safar Deya. Break it into two words. Many Mefarshim and the Zohar, and everybody speaks about this, or Nachman speaks about it. Safar means either, what does the word safar mean? First of all, it means to make a sound, like a tzipur, right?
Language?
Yeah, it's language, absolutely language. And Deya is intimate knowing, right? How do you get to know somebody? By talking to them. Chit chat, right? You endear yourself through words, right? Words of empathy, connection, interest. That's how relationships grow. That's what they're all about. But a tzipur is also very noisy. Because the tzipur, right? The birds are chirping away all day long. Now, that means that it's not something that's done with tzniut. Because birds blabbermouth all over. As it says, when Yaacov wanted to talk to Rachel and Leah about returning to Eretz Yisrael, right? He took them out into the field. And Rashi over there says, why did he take them out into the field? To discuss their plans. Because a little birdie told me, somebody's going to tell it over to Lavan, which eventually did happen anyway. And that's the story. So a tzipor deya means essentially connection with an intimacy without tzniut, in a prust way, in a way which is visible and heard by all. Right? And that's the antithesis of intimacy from a Torah perspective, which is all about tzniut and privacy and exclusivity and kedusha. Right? So the midah of Yesod calls for, that's why it's called the midah of Yosef HaTzadik, right? The midah corresponds, Malchut corresponds to David HaMelech. And David HaMelech is the end game, is the one who brings us to the highest level of Hashgacha Pratis that exists, which is when the Beis HaMikdash is mamish ready to be launched. He prepared everything to the doorstep, and his son Shlomo implemented it. So he was really part of the Beis HaMikdash. He discovers Yerushalayim. Did you know that? David was the one who, together with his Rebbe, Shmuel HaNavi, sat down and looked at the Chumash and looked for a remez as to where Hashem wants the Beis HaMikdash to be built. Because it had never been openly revealed, although they had traditions about about the Akedah and this and that. But the knowledge that it all happened from that one place. and that Adam Harishon was created from that place, that was revealed to Shmuel and to David HaMelech because of why? Of David's burning desire to see that the Beis HaMikdash would actually happen. So he was granted an opening to the secret, and he got to do it. Again, that's the example of it's not likely, it's not probable, it's not possible, but somehow it's possible. If you really, really ein davar olam v'nei ratzon, ein yushbalam klal, and therefore his grandchildren, Menashe, found a way back from an impossible situation, and so did Chizkiyahu HaMelech. Remember the story of Chizkiyahu HaMelech? Also, a great and righteous son of King David comes in the Navi and tells him, pack your bags, you're going to Shemayim, it's over for you. What did I do wrong? You refuse to have children. Why? Because I know a terrible Russia is going to come out of me. Which terrible Russia? Menashe. And I should be very careful about speaking about Menashe because according to the Gemara in Sanhedrin, the great rabbis of the Talmud were chastised for speaking about the wickedness of Menashe. And Menashe came to one of them in the dream and says, hey, I'll teach you a halacha that you don't know. He says, what kind of halacha? You're going to teach me a halacha? It's like my son saw me watching a motivational video. And he was so amused. He goes, that guy's going to tell a rabbi what to do? I go, yeah, this is for my work. No, he couldn't fathom such a thing. Yeah, probably right. But the idea is that, yeah, we have to be careful about Menashe. Menashe came to the Amoraim and said, I'll teach you, where do you break the bread to make hamotzi? Which part of a loaf of bread that's whole should you make hamotzi on? Should you cut yourself a nice big slice in the middle? No. Which part do we do? The crusty part on the end. And that's what he taught him halacha. And according to the Gemara, he knew immense amount. So they asked him, so what went wrong? You're such a huge Talmud Chacham. What went wrong? And he says, if you would have been alive in our era with the powerful Yetzer Hara that we had to do Avodah Zarah, you would have done it too. And he said, what have we done too? You would have picked up your Bekasha and come running to the Avodah Zarah. So don't prejudge. Even though those people they were great people. But Chizkiyahu HaMelech was told, okay, you didn't listen to Hashem, you didn't want to have children, that's it, you're dead. Turns around, and what does Chizkiyahu do? What was his response? No way! Can you imagine? A Navi of Hashem comes to you and tells you, this is what's going to happen. How much hope are you going to have that it's not going to happen? I have a direct message from you for Hashem. I sent a letter by the Israeli Post 30 days ago and it still hasn't gotten there. Do you understand? We're not talking about the Israeli Post. We're talking about, and that was a registered letter, okay? Yeah. So you got an open declaration from Hashem. You are about to die. So you make your will. You make out your final will and estate. No. Chizkiyahu says, sorry, I learned from my Zaidi David HaMelech what. Afilu cherev chada munach al tzarecha. You have a sharp sword